Oh, not on me.
Just, we can do no video too. Audio.
No, we definitely will do video. Let's do video. I think just facing the room for now is fine. I'm gonna monitor the chat in YouTube. I've already. Yeah, we definitely will do video. Let's do video. I think just facing the room for now. Yep, definitely you. I'm gonna. That sounds miserable via audio.
I'm using YouTube.
There we go.
I'll pay you back. Not right now.
I was like, no.
I don't know if any deep brownie.
Oh,
See a little video.
I'm just gonna look into the
This is basically that up there. I'm gonna minimize the video window, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fun graphic. Junos. All right, here I am in YouTube.
Yes, you did. And it's long.
Reading.
I didn't even.
Great. Awesome.
Well, yeah, you stop sharing or just get a full screen video.
Okay.
I totally learned about this like 3 weeks ago. I can just push this to YouTube now and I don't have to listen to all these resources.
So amazing.
Because we have, we're covering an all-day thing.
Yeah, that's
Raucous.
what Larissa said.
Yeah.
Oh, the global challenges, yeah,
Yeah.
which we did not mean to compete with the keynote right now, but
Okay.
it's hard to schedule around everything else going
It's the
on.
worst time of the year.
It really is. I'm feeling a personal day very soon.
Yeah, I did that. Because there was nothing on the calendar, and now I just can't take the day off. So I just took Monday and Tuesday off.
Yay.
I'm sick.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Oh, we have 12 people watching. Hi, everyone.
Yep, they can hear you. Everything is unmuted right now.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
I'll probably be monitoring it anyway, because I'll be editing videos like this.
Good. Thanks so much. You guys are the best. Yeah.
Okay. Basically, I mean, that was the average though. Selling you graduated. So how we have probably should have started, right? So like they graduated. Or did you guys? Yeah, right up. Oh, thank you. So I said I
Ready, Josie?
For what?
This is all you.
No, it's not. Not on me. I don't know these policies. I don't know academic standings, that's for sure. No, it's okay.
Well, it's okay when you have a desk to put it on, but if you don't, it's kind of useless.
Yeah, that's what John.
So who's going to the degree work, Sean?
Mary.
That's it? Is Mary going?
Yeah, once away.
Then why didn't you go? If she wasn't going, come out. I was gonna call you to say, wait. Oh, I didn't go. I'm not going either.
Yeah, so.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, it'd be like, I just thought. Who? Vince who? Vince, Amoros going to degree work?
Yes.
Why?
Because Rebecca moves up to him now, Rebecca oversees the inter college.
Oh, yeah.
He's gonna come back.
He just wants to go to New Orleans. That's what he wants.
I was gonna say, like, what
I don't
does-
really, I mean, I'm not going.
Well, advising, sometimes.
Yeah, David is.
Yeah, but it's a little, degree work is a little high level, like you have to understand the application before you can understand. Because if you go there, you're gonna be like a Disney tune, like wide-eyed, and be like, oh my God, let's do this. And you kind of have to navigate.
Yeah, it's like-
I mean, like,
Alright.
Let me know what's helpful to.
What's the order of the agenda?
It was a financial session, it was really good. I remember when
I just have to pull it up.
Yeah, but anyway, I think I'm gonna go to agro-technology in
Leave
July.
absence.
Oh.
Okay,
I mean, I
Because it's in Las Vegas.
he was gonna go anyway.
okay,
He's going earlier.
Oh,
alright.
well, it'll be good because then I can teach
Little
on
rolling
the
table.
for residency in the summer.
I'm gonna just hang out.
Where's that conference?
Control this.
Las Vegas. I'm gonna plan all my conferences around like shows and things like that. No, I'm only kidding. I don't know.
So like the year was in New Orleans, was Jazz,
Easy,
Jazz
Donnie
was
Osmond.
Acro.
Great.
Oh,
I was watching the match.
Oh, I was too, I was too. I thought that was Neil Patrick Harris, I could have sworn it, but it didn't sound like, I don't think he can sing, that was the only thing.
What, Neil Patrick?
Yeah, yeah, but I didn't think that sounded like his voice.
No, that's
That monster really threw me off, but now it made sense because I knew that voice from somewhere, and I'm like, I know that voice. I did guess the moose, the lion,
I guess
the rabbit,
the Jackson.
the rabbit, I guess the rabbit was, yeah.
Alrighty, so I figure we get started. We have plenty of people online.
I have 25.
Oh, wow.
Online.
All right. Okay, good. All right, so we thought we'd take some time to use this, I guess, meeting to talk about enrollment policies, academic standing. These are pretty, I would say, significant changes, and everyone has heard about them, but we really haven't had a focused conversation, and we get lots of questions. And so I think we just take some time to talk about what is policy, what is process, how these things developed, and just give a good overview about, so if you look at the agenda, we're starting with enrollment policies. We have Joseph and Sean here, and Sean from AIS also, but you know, this really was a collaborative effort between various parties in the university and the provost office. This is not just something that we just, you know, came up with, but we all just, I think we all have to be mindful that because these are new, because things haven't been updated like right before fall, we're sort of, there's hiccups, there's bumps, and we're all working through them, and that's why we're taking this time to just have a really good discussion and dialogue about what's going on. And I think at the end of the day, from our perspective, it really is, it's to help students. It's not, and to come from a supportive place. It's not punitive. It's not, it's more looking at a very holistic student approach, part-time students, full-time students, everything. So why don't we just get into the discussion. And I think that we're going to talk about enrollment policies. So we're going to start leave of absence. And I think, and I'm going to ask Joseph to join me at some point, but we'll start with leave of absence. And something that has been coming up a lot is talking about intentionality of the student. And I think it's a wonderful way of looking at these policies, because from an advisor's point of view, you know, a lot of things can be transactional, but and especially on the grad college side, we are the end, I guess, person as far as or end group of a process or a change, but we never really talk about what the intention of the student is. So we'll talk about leave of absence, because we never really had a leave of absence policy. Like we had a policy, but it wasn't built out to really cover all the categories of how you leave Drexel, how you come back, what if you stop out week 7, what happens? So this is part of the I don't know, process and updates that we've taken with leave of absence. So Joseph, do you mind taking it from here?
Sure.
We can discuss.
So part of what, well, hello, everybody. Part of what Natalie talked about is we never really had a leave of absence policy. So what did that mean? Well, students that needed to take a break in their tenure didn't understand what to do. And as a result of that, they kind of felt somewhat imprisoned by the courses that they were in. They really needed to take an exit for various reasons. And the way the procedure was written, it was written that you couldn't evoke a leave of absence in the term. Anytime it happened after drop add, it was processed for the subsequent term. So imagine the frustration of a student that is experiencing difficulties, whether academically, whether health, whether a variety of things, is told that, well, you can't take a leave of absence after drop add. That's not really an adequate way to address the situation. And part of it is the way this was written was a procedure. So the student, it was very systematic. You picked up a form, you saw your advisor, you were told what you could and could not do. You filed the form, and then the form sometimes got processed correctly, sometimes didn't get processed correctly. And the end result was the students still had their courses for the term. So you did point in time, it impacted the future, but the students still needed to know, well, I'm enrolled in courses, what do I do? So when we designed this policy with the graduate college, with the provost office, we kind of wanted to marry the two and say that if a leave of absence takes place, it's point in time. As a result of the leave, this is how courses will be treated. This is how the student status will be affected. This is how grades, if grades are applicable, will come into play. So part of what that has caused is the ability for students to understand that, hey, it's okay, I can exit a term. And if I exit in different intervals within the term, this is how registration will be impacted. This is how my grades will be impacted. This is how my future planning or tenure will be impacted. So part of that is we have clear orientations about what we want to do with we have clear like situational aspects of this policy. But as Natalie said, we're really working on revising the leave of absence form, because for some reason, the return date on the leave of absence form fell off, and I'm not sure why that happened. I think it's on the graduate one, but on the undergraduate one, it mysteriously disappeared. So we're kind of like trying to put the forms together so that this way, the most important aspect is we want to know when the student's going to return. Because on the undergraduate side, and these are bachelor's, master's students, it has an impact to their co-op cycles. It has an impact to how things are going to be moving forward. So what I really wanted to say was that we are in the process of revising the form so that we can have a unified form for undergraduates and graduate students. Currently, the leave of absence form will satisfy that need, and you'll also add a caveat of what to do when the student takes a leave after the 7th week. So remember, if I was a student and it was the old way, I would come to an advisor and I would say, I need to take a leave of absence, if and only if I could find the procedure, which was embedded and hidden somewhere on the graduate college website or on Drexel Central's website. Now they can go to the provost site, they can see what a leave of absence is, they can see when they can execute it, evoke it in terms of the week. So the tenure will be, if it's in the first week, the courses will be dropped, the leave information will be put on the record. We always put a leave of absence hold, and we put the dates out there. So if it's anywhere from weeks 2 to 7, accordingly, the courses will be withdrawn, the leave dates will be put on the student's record, a hold will be placed and the information is housed in the system. It's very important for students to take a leave of absence and not just fall off the face of the earth in terms of withdrawing or dropping all my courses. And does anyone know why that is? Well, because from a financial aid standpoint, from an enrollment reporting standpoint, the federal government needs to understand where, and the Department of Education is where the student is in their academic tenure. If a student drops or withdraws all their courses and there is no leave dates, they will automatically report the student as withdrawn. And that has serious implications to the student in terms of their time to degree, their expected date of graduation, and most importantly, if these students had filed federal financial aid and they are obligated to paying the government back, so their loan repayments kick in, and it could impact their times where the student can be, not, and I'm not the financial aid expert, but you have a grace period, it could impact their grace period, their loans will kick in, and the student will be responsible for starting to pay. Now, if I'm not enrolled, that will still happen, but at least the Department of Education and Enrollment, all the folks that rely on the enrollment data know, hey, you're not enrolled half-time, you're still responsible if you're out of your grace period, but we know that you are expected to complete your degree. It kind of helps that student if they're filing hardships or other things that are happening in their life, because to the government, the Department of Education might say, oh, this student is withdrawn, has no intentions of returning back to Drexel University. It kind of impacts the decisions that are made. So in the past, if a student were to drop all their courses or withdraw from all their courses, sometimes they would drop on the web, or I would get a withdrawal form through the graduate college would get it, and all their courses would be withdrawn. But there would be no comments of what the intentionality of the student is. That is extremely problematic because we need to know what the student is, what their intention is. If they're coming back, if they're taking a leave, because I could be withdrawing from all my courses and I could be withdrawing from the institution. If I'm withdrawing from the institution, then we don't use a course withdrawal form, they use a university withdrawal form. So no longer should we just be signing off on course withdrawals without understanding what the intention of the student is. And sometimes you may or may not have that information, but it's best to capture that information, because in those situations, if I'm dropping with all my courses or withdrawing from all my courses and I have an intention of returning the next term, we really want to fill out a leave of absence form. Because if you drop or withdraw in a term, even though I'm coming back right the next term, you can't be active. You can't be an active student and you've withdrawn from all your courses and it's week 3. We need to protect the student by putting specific dates that the student is going to be out for the term. And then in those situations, we're working on a flow, which will present, we're not going to put a hold on a student's record if they're coming back the next term, but we have to capture those dates because you can't just withdraw all your courses and not be, so we really are going to be using a leave of absence for those. So no longer are we going to say, you're going to hold your questions, please, because let me finish my statements. So you're no longer going to be a drop, or you're not going to just be a withdrawal, and we don't understand what's going on with the student. Also, there are a lot of financial aid things that are related to tenure of the student. People pay attention what's in the system. So if these students are getting funded by the college, if there's institutional aid, these decisions play upon this to know that, oh, the student's just taking a break. Financial aid can look at that information, or if it's a true leave of absence with multiple terms, it will protect the student when they want to refile for the federal aid, for the institutional aid. So who had a question in the back? Yes.
I appreciate acting on intentionality of the student. In that spirit, maybe if the student is dropping or withdrawing from other courses and the course of action is to submit a leave of absence form, should we then, for the course withdrawal form, remove that stipulation at the bottom that says, are you withdrawing or removing?
Well, what's happening is we're going to put that on the leave of absence form.
Okay.
And also there's a caveat in the leave of absence after week 8, which I can employ the one-time option of withdrawing all my courses. We're going to add that as well. So then the student could check that. So the leave of absence form, if there's going to be if there's not going to be a drop or withdrawal of courses, we want the leave of absence form to accommodate that. And thank you for adding that, because the original intentionality was to use the withdrawal form, but that doesn't make sense. So if I'm not going to be active in a term and I'm all of my enrollment is gone, whether it's dropped or withdrawn, we'd like it to come through the leave of absence process. And on the leave of absence form, it will say, it'll say the return date. If we know what the return date is, we won't put the hold on the student's record. So like I said, we're working this out. We're finishing it on the undergraduate side, and the leave of absence form will be finalized hopefully within a couple of weeks. So at that point, we're going to remove it off of the course withdrawal.
Okay.
No,
Just a follow-up if you don't mind. I really appreciate that because if a student is in a hard situation, it's a lot easier to just have that discussion, fill out the leave of absence form, be done with it, as opposed to going instructor by instructor, doing all that approval. However, the vast majority of course withdrawals that I work with are part-time students who are just withdrawing from one course with the full intention of just resuming their study the next quarter. And it sounds like from this discussion that by default, they would be in a leave of absence.
yes.
So that's correct, even if the student is withdrawing from a form?
Is it all of their coursework for the term?
Yeah, because
Yes.
often our students are just taking
Yeah.
one.
And that's fine. So in that scenario, when we have the leave, we're not going to put a hold on a record for a student. But what we have to be careful with, a student can say to you, yes, I'm just having a difficult term. It's very difficult in the graduate and part-time world than it is with the undergraduate, because part-time and graduate students are not required to enroll every term unless you're in a doctoral program or, it's mandated. So we just have to we have to fine tune those so that we will, but we're not going to chase after the student because we're not putting a hold. We're just documenting what's happening in the term. If they don't enroll in the next term, that's okay. On the undergraduate side, that's not okay. So we're not going to penalize the student by chasing after them and saying, hey, you didn't enroll, and now I'm going to put a hold on your record. So that's how we're kind of working out those nuances. But yes, exactly. If that person does drop or withdraw for all their courses in the term, we'd like to use the leave of absence form, because what's going to happen is, say that student doesn't come back in the next term, at least the loan agencies, financial aid, and the other folks know that, hey, they did do this with the intention of returning, so that it's not just I just did everything and I'm lost somewhere. So it really kind of, as much information that we can capture about the intentionality of the student, not only helps the advising role, it helps the academic role, it helps the other administrative offices that are dealing with billing, financial aid. And the other thing is, if these ever surface in an appeal, we have all of that documented.
So a very, very common situation I have is a student is taking one course, they're working full-time, they're not able to complete the course, they're going to withdraw from that course. So under this new process, they should fill out a leave of absence form. Does that form include anywhere for the instructor to acknowledge the course withdrawal? Because it sounds like they would just fill out a leave of absence form, which would withdraw them from the course and have no discussion with the instructor, which was an essential part of the course withdrawal process.
Well, yes, but remember, we are revamping the course withdrawal process to eventually move it online. And part of that, if it's moved online, instructors will automatically get communicated if somebody withdraws from the course. So that's a great point. Currently, in our current environment, we can tweak some of it that, what we've been doing with some online students in some colleges, that if advisors are withdrawing the students, we encourage the students to outreach to the instructors saying withdrawing from the class. So what we could do is maybe add a caveat that I've communicated with my instructors about my intention to withdraw. I mean, so it's fine tuning some of that, but that's a great question.
Okay.
And it's great feedback as well.
All right. I guess it just sounds like for the part-time students that we work with, they will no longer be filling out course withdrawal.
Well, they will if they're keeping other courses on their record. Like if I have 6 credits and I'm withdrawing from 3. If I'm withdrawing from the whole term or dropping from the whole term, yeah, that is correct.
There's a question online from Jean Brody in Artemin. What if we don't know when the student's going to be able to return?
In that case, then if the student is doing that, then they're uncertain. It's best that they fill out a leave and with an estimate of when it is. If the student is like, I'm coming back, it's still the same process. So what we'd really like to do is, you'd have to get the best idea, because what's going to happen is that student is not going to be protected. They may fall into the readmission process. Once you fall into the readmission process, you're going to have to formally go back through admissions. So we really want to make sure that we capture as much information about the student. And if that student goes through the readmission process, filled out a leave of absence, has institutional aid, financial aid will be able to review that and say, oh, the student is 1 term off of leave of absence, we'll honor it, rather than having the student file for institutional aid all over again with the department, which can cause problems. Yes, Sarita.
So if student does a leave of absence, let's say, what shows up on their transcript, W?
If a student executes a leave of, that's the next part. So are there any questions between the drop and 2 to 7, like the normal situation? So when you think about it, a leave is a leave, so to say. So basically, I'm dropping or withdrawing all my courses. I may have the intention of returning the subsequent term, or I may not return the subsequent term. On the graduate world, it's a bit different and part-time, I get it. Like, they're not required to enroll. So, but it's all in the messaging. So what we'd like to do is when this is finalized with the form, we'd like to consider like the messaging that advisors should have. So in terms of why a leave is important. It's not just an administrative, like red tape. It's really to protect the intention of the student, because sometimes these students could be in critical situations where they have best intentions of returning and physically, financially, they can't. So we were going to say, so there's exit strategies in terms of protecting your tenure if I do return, or they could withdraw. I mean, we don't want them to withdraw, but it's appropriate that they file the proper. It's better that we know that the student withdrew from the institution than the student just fell out, went through the readmission process, and we didn't know what happened to them. So at least we know that the student was in a situation, it protects them, it cleans up their record nicely, it reports them accordingly, it doesn't mess up their ability to go somewhere else, it doesn't screw around with their financial aid, their loan repayments. So that's what we really have to think about. I don't want any student to withdraw. Here, I don't. But if that's the case, unfortunately, the course withdrawal form satisfied a variety of needs, and it really shouldn't have. So in week 8, are there any other questions? Because I'm going to address Sarit's question. So in week 8, the student at that point has to work with the instructors if they're negotiating any incompletes or finishing the coursework. They can keep the grades that they've earned up to that point, meaning if the instructor is willing to submit a grade, I could have completed 75, 80% of the course, etc. Or the student has a one-time option of getting all W's. If and only if no other courses were graded. So I could be in a part of term course, say week 5, I could have gotten a D or a C minus. Let's just do my favorite, it's a C. So let's say I got a C, and now it's the 8th week and I want to take a leave. That doesn't mean that that C is getting erased by a W. That means that C is going to remain, and any other courses that I have the option of getting that W. So basically, it's not, we're washing off all your courses, because we're not. I could have completed a class in week 5, gotten graded. It's let's say it's even week 9, because the way the policy is written is week 8 into final exam weeks. So the student does have that one-time only option. We're gonna look at the leave of absence form to say that I understand that by evoking this one-time option, what will happen with the course, but that student is not going to be able to enroll in the subsequent term. If you're taking a leave of absence and evoking the all W's, it's not going to be a mechanism for you to get out of failing courses. Yes, absolutely. So that we definitely want to make sure. So that is explicit. So clearly what happens is that was written for a true leave, which is 1 term or more. But now that I'm dropping or withdrawing all my courses, it is a leave. So we kind of need to make sure that you can't return in the subsequent term. So it's not going to be, it's week 9, I'm failing my classes, I'm beyond the withdrawal period. Let me just say I'm taking a leave so that you can give me all W's, and then I'm going to re-enroll again.
Who's going to be like making sure that people don't try to?
They have holds on their account.
Well, if the student does a true LOA, and it is, they would have a hold on their account.
Right, but
But
let's say like 3 terms later, they decide to do the same thing. Like how?
we are going to be putting notes in ABT when we process it. So when the registrar's office processes it and the one-time only option is evoked, it will be available for you to see that the student has used it. So it's not going to be something that no one's going to pay attention to, because we don't want this to become a mechanism for students. But think about what happened in the old way. I was a student and I took a leave of absence. The leave of absence was processed, since we're in winter, for spring. I had 2 courses. It was week 8. The leave of absence was being processed in The subsequent term, I didn't know what to do with these courses. I ended up stopped attending. Then they rolled into incompletes, NGRs, or Fs. Guess what happened to that student? That student would petition a late course withdrawal because they said I didn't complete these. So it became a vicious cycle, or the student couldn't get any money back if it was week 5 because the courses were left as is. So by putting these two together, it understands the intentionality of the student, it acts within the moment, it looks at the courses and treats them accordingly. So that's the leave of absence. So it took a long journey to get to where we were now, because there wasn't a leave of absence policy for obvious reasons, because you can't really generalize so many different caveats for different students that are in different situations. So there are some more things that are going to happen. We're going to revise the form. We're going to make it clear about the one-time only option. We're also going to make it clear about if a student is withdrawing with the intention of returning. Going back to Sean's comments about, the course withdrawal form, we're looking at thinking the leave of absence to accommodate that, and we'll also work on what the student should do. Now remember, there are rules and guidelines on the undergraduate leave of absence form, which can apply to the graduate students, some of them. So what we'd like to do is create an instructional sheet for the student to understand that if, as a result of this, this is what you should do. And that works really nicely. And we're also working with academic information and systems to create a return from leave of absence. So if a student is coming back from leave of absence, there's protocols that the student needs to do to get financial aid, to go through the cycle. And on the undergraduate side, it'll work really nicely. We're going to see how it'll work on the graduate side. Because right now, if the student comes back from a leave of absence, what happens? If they actually declare a leave of absence. Well, they will meet with their advisor. They could be in a situation where I could enroll. If I didn't take a leave of absence, I may fall within the readmit period. If I didn't, I have to be readmitted. There is no designation that I was on leave. I may or may not have filed for financial aid. So there's a lot of things that the advisor can't handle in that one meeting. So it's appropriate that the student, I could also be a graduate student and have a co-op. So there's a lot of things that have to be accounted for that are not. And there's a lot of responsibility, some of it warranted and some of it unnecessary, that seems to fall on the advisor to say, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And part of that is there's no guarantee that the student's going to follow up. So, we're really trying to make it easier for the student to understand that what it is to take a leave, and more importantly, to come back from a leave. Because remember, if a student has spoken and said, I want to take a leave of absence, it's the institution's responsibility to make sure that the student can come back seamlessly. So everything that we need to do, that student is still an active and current student. The student didn't withdraw from the institution. The student was transparent enough to say, I'm taking a leave. The expectation is that you're aware of the leave, and when I'm returning, it should be a seamless integration back at the university. Unfortunately, that is not how it is now. Okay, yes.
Policy was effective fall. Right?
Yes. Yes, sorry.
So I have some students that want to take like a quarter off or 2 quarters off. What warrants a leave of absence? Would it be more than 2?
It's one or more quarters. So if they are, they should be doing it. If a student knows that they're not going to enroll, it's in the best interest that the student tell the institution for a variety of reasons. Different programs have time to degrees, different programs have a lot of, so if you are really saying, hey, I need to take off 2 terms, that's kind of like an excused absence because we've approved it, we warrant it, we understand it, rather than you just not taking 2 terms off. It's best to protect the student. So yes, I would actually have the student fill out a leave of absence form.
Oh, thank you.
No, you're quite welcome. Yes.
We've been getting a lot of students that are coming to us in week 6 or 7 and saying something very tragic happened to me in week 1, week 2. I need to withdraw my courses. What should we be following in that situation? Because I know we're not supposed to be doing retroactive and all that stuff, but there's like this very shady area as to like when something happened and when they finally use the student.
We like to talk about
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I got one yesterday or just a few days ago. I had a death in the family and the day after the term started, right in week 1. and then they thought that they could get through their classes.
Right.
And then they realized they can't, so now they're seeking something. So what Joseph and I have talked about, and our team is talking about attendance, right? Because yes, there is acknowledgement of an extenuating circumstance, but we also want to check attendance. And that's, because sometimes something happens and they do stop attending, and then maybe a faculty member hasn't reached out, or it's not even on your radar yet, and you didn't know that the student's not participating. So, we're handling them on a case-by-case basis at this point, but we're trying to move away from saying that we're going to set, we're going to reset the term, because we can't reset the term. Could be employer remission, there could be, financial aid, there institutional aid, like there's all these different things. So, and also I always say, as much as it's maybe the extenuating circumstances horrendous, or, whatever it may be, they still used our time, our facilities, our teaching time, all of those things, and they kept going, and they actually earned a grade. That happens too. Like, and I'm like, oh, well, I had this, and I only want to withdraw from one course, not the other. So I don't know, Joseph, do you have more comments? Because we talked about attendance.
What I'd like to say, right, there are unfortunate things that happen in life, and we can't control them. Like, what we really want to do is we really want to be sympathetic to the student, but we also want to be pretty much transparent that if something happened in week 6 or 7 and you've attended 60 to 70% of the course, we can't erase that enrollment. The student was enrolled, it was reported to the Department of Education, it was on various reports, it was on loan agencies. Removing that enrollment is falsifying the records of the institution, and it's pretty much against the law. And we could be held liable on many different levels, specifically if a student is federally funded with aid, attended 70% of the course, got a refund, and then we're moving their enrollment back. It's a little, it's like cooking the books. And I think that we really can't operate in that environment. A better way to say it to the student is, because either way, every single student that has an unfortunate event, whether it's, a medical condition, whether it's an accident, they want to reset the term. But depending on where they are in the term, they may be able to work on an incomplete academically. So to answer your question, if a student has attended and there's academic engagement, it's from that point of academic engagement forward. Okay. So the dial can't be moved to the drop ad week. So what Natalie was saying was, we have situations with students that don't contact an advisor until week 7, but they actually stopped attending in week 2. So we will outreach to the professors and get engagement. And if we've done the due diligence that the institution has proven that the student was engaged up until a certain point, we're covered. So if auditors come, we'll say, well, you can't really keep a student's financial aid if the student never attended the institution. That's another violation. So part of it is, if I stopped attending in week 3, okay, we can work with the student. But not every student falls in that category. So once academic engagement is there, whether it's BB Learn activity, it's quizzes, it's exams, it's communications with the professor, it's from that point forward. So if I communicated with my professor in week 3, I went in to learn, I took a quiz, and then I fell off because there was something going on. I got really sick, and then I came back in week 9 and say, hey, I've really had a difficult term. I would listen to the student, what we do on the undergraduate side, and Natalie handles the appeals. On the undergraduate side, we have a statement from the student. We accept the appeal. We work on it, but most of the times we understand that if it's beyond the first week, we don't endorse a late drop. So there is flexibility with the withdrawals, and things are prorated. So even if I don't get week 1, getting week 2 or 3 is still advantageous before week 5. But we really want to work with the student. More importantly, we want to protect the institution. So by doing that due diligence, we have to look for academic engagement. Once academic engagement is there, then we can make a decision on where to go. Yes.
I still have a question about part-time grad students who are registered for one class, and it's not a crisis situation. They just want to drop the class between weeks 2 and 7. According to the leave of absence policy, they won't get a W But if they were to do a course withdrawal, even though they're not going to.
No, they will get a W. They will get a W.
They
In weeks 2 to 7, they will get a W.
Okay,
Yeah,
so then I'm reading it wrong.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
that's why.
yeah, so in weeks 2 to 7, they will get a W. In week 1, the courses are dropped. It's after week 7, beginning week 8 into finals, where you run into the difficulty that it's after the withdrawal period. So we either have to work on incompletes, negotiate the grades, or they have the one-time option.
Okay.
So we kind of structured it that the student understands that where I am in the term and what's happening. As before, they would take a leave and they would expect the courses to disappear. They would expect the courses. So this is pretty transparent in terms of saying, you're in this is what happens. So we really want the student to evoke the leave, which is first, and then this is how your courses are treated.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Yes.
Some of our programs have a vacation term in the summer term, so students don't enroll in any courses. They would not have to complete.
No,
because it's built in.
right, if it's, right, so if it's built in. So also those programs are protected because what happens is some of the summer enrollments in the clearinghouse file, they use it, but they also don't always use it because if we report it, they'll use it, but they know that that's like an off term for most people. So what they usually use, they use our major terms. And remember, we're mapped to semester schools are usually fall and spring, and then summer optional or summer 1 and 2. So they usually operate on that scale. So our summer files, if we report them, they'll use them. If not, then the students are not penalized. Okay, we're going to move on to the university withdrawal, which is somewhat, I think it's much simpler because, you know, the intentionality of the student is to withdraw from the institution. The differences were that in the old policy, we prevented students from withdrawing from the institution in week 7. So that caused a lot of angst and grief for many students and departments. So what does that mean? Well, we would allow you to withdraw, but after week 7, it was effective the next term. So what we did is we moved the withdrawal all the way up until week 10. So a student can withdraw from the institution all the way up to week 10. If they withdraw into finals, that means they keep the grades that they've earned. Or the same caveat, if I've withdrawn and there's already any grades that are earned, those grades are not converted to W's. So I could be in part of term courses, accelerated courses, I could already have a grade, and then in week 9, I want to withdraw from the institution. Well, that's fine. Your other courses will be W'd, but the courses that are graded will remain. If it's after the last day of classes and into final exam week, the student keeps the grades that they've earned. However, if I withdraw from the institution, I cannot come back in subsequent term. And if I withdraw from the institution, I need to be readmitted back into the institution. So these are caveats that'll protect students from trying to withdraw up to week 10 if they're failing classes, which is beyond the withdrawal period, which ends in week 7. That's kind of why it was prevented, but they didn't give a protocol for students, because guess what would happen? It's week 8, I want to withdraw from the institution, and I don't really care about the grades that I've earned. The student would leave, stop attending, didn't take any finals. Those would come back as late course withdrawal appeals, because the student was saying, stopped attending, it's week 8, you told me I couldn't withdraw, I didn't want to finish this term, now I have all Fs, and they would come back and petition it. And clearly, because they didn't submit the final mode of assessment, they could have stopped out, they had sporadic attendance. So it kind of really gives the student the option of saying, this is how, if you withdraw during these intervals, this is how your grades and this is how your courses will be treated. So that was done also to help students. Like I said, we don't want students to leave, but more importantly, we don't want students to leave and then, have them, bogged down with a lot of other issues if they're trying to, go to another institution, or maybe they're just taking a break. Okay, are there any questions about university withdrawal? So I will tell you that these have been very successful on the undergraduate side, because a lot of the students that were in these catch-22 situations about not knowing how to execute a leave of absence would just withdraw from all their courses, and they never formally did a leave of absence. They got caught in the readmission cycle. Now there are students that clearly are withdrawing from their courses. They're taking leaves appropriately. We have their leaves documented, and they're protected in the duration of their academic tenure. But more importantly, they don't go beyond They don't, it's not processed in the subsequent, and then we have a bunch of late course withdrawal appeals to handle between weeks 2 and 7 because the student stopped attending. I'm sorry, after week 7. Okay, and also, you know, the leaves are processed in the moment, which means that any financial aid gets returned appropriately. R2T4 calculations, which are based on federally funded aid, are done in a timely fashion. And also students get the appropriate refunds that they are entitled to. So, okay. Are there any other questions on that? Okay. Perfect segue into academic standing.
That's right.
They're always sitting
I'm
there.
just trying. All right, academic standing. So we survived fall. We certainly had some good substantive questions that, you know, we've been able to update and make some additional changes. But one thing that I was in the attachments that Sandra sent out was actually a flow chart. We think sometimes looking at a visual representation of this process is helpful. I know certainly it is for our team because I've been looking at this for 3 years. And, you know, want to make sure all the arrows go to the right category. So did everyone have a chance to just take a look at it? Hopefully, okay. So I guess, I mean, it's established, it's moving. We've, like I said, we've had some discussion and some, you know, good questions from advisors that we were actually able to make changes. But I think the biggest changes here is this category of advising check. So the intent behind of creating that category is to allow students an opportunity if their where are we here? If their term GPA is below 3, but their CUME is above, this one category down here, this advising check allows them to not go right to probation. It allows them the 2 terms to even out the term in the CUME. So we think that that's been helpful. And part of the history of that is for part-time students who are only taking 1 class a term, maybe 2 classes a term, to give them some, you know, some extra time to recover. So I think that was helpful. And that was actually came from 2 colleges, CCI and LeBeau, that were really needed that extra time and pointed that out for us. And then the other thing that we did update immediately when it was brought up to us from one of the colleges is about which one is it? It's that one here. If their term and/or CGPA is below the 2, the student will automatically be dismissed. Sorry, yeah, so it was below 2. So we changed the coding because the coding was incorrect and it didn't reflect the policy accurately. So that was changed, and that was an immediate change. So any students who fell in that category, we actually adjusted everything with working with the advisors. And then also the new first-term graduate student, if your term and CGPA are equal, are equal and greater than 2.0 but below 3.0, the student will go on advisor check. So it's not an immediate dismissal. So those are the updates we've been talking about for a long time. Does anyone have specific questions that we can discuss here?
We should also mention, are we going to mention the repeat?
Yeah, and so the other 2 sort of supporting policies, I would say that we have to be mindful of is the course repeat policy. That was modified to also assist here. So the students used to, our old policy was that they could only repeat a course twice, right? And now we've aligned it with the undergraduate policy that the student can repeat the course and petition for the higher grades to be counted. And so that was something that was helpful. The other thing that we did is adjust the grade policy to C, and this is, and let me state that all programs can make higher standards. This is just a minimum guideline that C is a passing grade. Some programs do not adhere to that, and some programs think that's fine. And that's not just, here it is, right?
And so the student, we didn't want to make it a policy that students can just get all Cs but still needed a 3.0 to graduate. That just didn't make sense because it would never work, right? So we made this caveat that students may not receive more than 2 C grades in graduate courses towards degree completion, and any additional grades of C beyond the allowable 2 will not be counted towards degree progression. However, they will be counted in the term and CUME GPA calculations. So I think those are the updates and improvements. Does anyone have any questions?
So is there anything on the policy for academic standing specifically about part-time students?
No, so we didn't make a separate section for part-time students. That was in one version, I think, many moons ago, that we did have a separate section for part-time students, but we feel like the adjustments here, and just so you know, and I know you know, because I've been working with students specifically to walk through their standing, because we've had part-time students who had a certain standing under the old policy, and then their standing changed under the new policy, and they were very confused. So, we were mindful and working with them on a case-by-case basis, and we actually resolved some questions for the students, but just specifically answer your questions, no, there's not a separate section.
Right, and you have to remember the old policy was just CUME driven. So even if I was in a situation where I was taking one course and I was a new student, I could still run the risk of being dismissed. So the concern is that if you just operate in a CUME mentality, independent of the number of credits, then there never is a proactive way to intervene for the student, give them the resources that they need. This advisor check is a really good tool in terms of understanding the right fit for the student in the program, giving them the resources that they need to be successful. And more importantly, we also, if that part-time student is a new student and failed a course or did below the threshold for the grade, they have the ability to repeat, which we didn't have before. So many of those challenging aspects of the old policy created situations where the students were doomed. They never got a chance, and they could have accumulated credits beyond that. So even if I'm a new student, that's the only time when I would have been caught with my CUME, because my CUME would have been below a 3.0. But if I'm progressively going, taking 1 or 2 courses at even whatever, and my term GPA is sliding down, no one ever looked at me. No one even paid attention to me because my overall CUME was absorbing all of that. So I could have easily started out with a 3.5, taken a couple of courses, it was chipping away, and I'm finally edging close to 45, and I have a really terrible term. And then my CUME drops below. Then it's really impossible to tell that student, now you can't graduate because you're less than a 3.0 and you spent all this financial. So what would happen is that student didn't even have the ability to repeat a course. So what was happening is departments were allowing those students to take other courses for which they were getting federal financial aid to improve their GPA, and their courses didn't apply to the master's because they finished it. Now we have the ability in those scenarios to catch them. So I think that what we have to look at is every single case on a case-by-case basis. It's not fair to students that are taking 9 credits if they have a different policy and GPA and other things are just catered to people that are taking less. I mean, I've been a graduate student, and I'm not saying this should be the rule. I've been a graduate student here for many years, and I was, no matter how many credits I took, we were held to the same standards. You can't create these separate tracks for people because then it creates this inequity for students.
But we also don't have, sorry to interrupt, but we also don't have true part-time programs.
Yes, we don't.
So we don't have anything that says, well, we have a part-time this, it's all about credits that they're taking, right? So the student can take 9, they can do 4.5, they can take 2, they can do, so it's all what their credits is. So it's not like we have these,
and they're also not here.
Designated
right.
categories, right? So to take a policy and turn it into a and call out a category that we one of our iterations of this 3 years ago had each credit week 0 to 4, 4.5 to this, like part-time, half-time, 3/4 time, all of that. And it just became very complex, and it's complex enough as it is. I'll actually write this out. So that's why we didn't do it all.
And I also want to add that the students in those situations never had the ability to repeat a course and the grade was removed, meaning the grade was not factored into their term and CUME. So those students were ending up repeating courses, paying money over and over again just to get that grade average. the ability to repeat 2 courses at the graduate program for a short tenure, which is 45 or less credits in the undergrad, is a blessing. And not many institutions offer that. So I will tell you that many institutions just have those students repeat the courses until they end up getting the right grade over and over again. The fact that I get an F and then I retake it and get an A, the F will remain on my transcript. I could have been dismissed in that term. I have the ability now to be in good standing to the next, moving forward. That never happened. That student that may have just been their first term could have gotten an F, and then that student was dismissed and may not have been reinstated. So we kind of have to look at this holistically and not target elements of the policy. And you know, I think the tendency sometimes is to get fixated on an aspect that may seem to be an inequity when really, as put together with the whole suite of things that we do for graduate students, ends up really balancing itself out. So, and every case is a unique case. So when a student is dismissed, not every student has the same standards for reinstatement. Different people fall in different categories. And we also have students that have medical conditions, that students that may not have attended. So we kind of have to look at everything holistically, like I said, because I could be in a situation where I could be dropped or dismissed and I never attended the class. So the issue is, you know, those students may not think that they have an option. They have the right to appeal a late course withdrawal. That will help them. It'll also remove them out of a category of standing if they fit the criteria. Also, please remember that we've changed the late course withdrawal policy, which we never really had one, but it basically says that students have 14 business days after the end of one term to petition a course withdrawal for the prior term. So that means if I'm in winter term, I have 14 business days, not calendar, business days when the institution is open. And those days are, so if you think about it, it's almost 2.5 weeks to think about what I wanted to do to petition, because we can't entertain petitions in spring for fall. There's a limited time frame based on federal regulations for financial aid for the Department of Education, and we have to do that. So I don't think we covered that here, but I just want to make sure that that applies to every student, undergraduate and graduate.
Okay. So any questions? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
If the student is dismissed and reinstated in the fall quarter, they fail the course, they retake that course down the line. Does that dismissal and reinstatement get removed from the transcript, or does it stay?
That stays.
Okay, and then same question, but if a instructor changes the grade for the following quarter, they went from a D to a B, does that change the status?
Yes.
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 Yes. Grade changes will rerun the standing.
Thank
We'll
you.
update the
Grade
standing.
changes or NGRs or incompletes, once they're reported, we usually run an audit and we work with the graduate college. If you catch it, TAS is really great. It's just, if we catch it and we may not have, just email the graduate college and we will fix the standing. And we fix the standing from that point in time forward. So we don't just, so that everything else will fall into line. No, you're welcome.
Okay. All right. So let us know any more questions, but I think this chart is helpful. It's good. It's a good cheat sheet for all of us. Okay. What else do we have on the agenda?
Oh, this is not recording.
So speaking of cheat sheets, so as we know, readmission has also been updated this fall. And I've been working with Joseph and colleagues throughout the university for 2 years. We meet
Yeah.
a year and a half,
Yeah.
almost 2 years. We meet every Monday at 11.
Every other.
Talking about readmission, what it is, what it means, everything. And something that the team developed was the spreadsheet that Sandra sent out. It was basically talking about which categories, what is readmissions, what students, when they have to go through admissions, when we use the CCS form, all these different things. So one of the biggest takeaways I would say is when a student changes level, right? Going from, a certificate to a master's, PhD back to a master's, like all these different things. A lot of times, well, you'll see some of them have to go through admissions, right? So we had a case just a few weeks ago that a PhD student did not complete their program. and was starting to take classes over in another college and thinking they were intending to take a minor in the other college, but decided they didn't want to do the minor, they wanted to do the master's in the other college. So in these new enrollment, readmission policies, that in that category, student didn't complete a PhD, wants to go to a master's in a totally different discipline, they have to apply to that program, right? Just because they took 2 courses does not mean that they're a shoo-in for that program. I mean, I think it's part of vetting. I think it's part of making sure that that is the student that you want in your program. So that category is a new admission. And I guess this has been in practice, this is happening, so we're seeing, any kind of, we're handling case by case basis, any bumps in the road, but I think this is very helpful also.
The concern that happened was that the readmission process in the past only looked at activity of the student. So if a student record was inactive, they automatically fell into the readmission bucket, but not every category was a readmission. So if a student graduated, the record became inactivated. Everyone assumed that when a record is inactivated, you go through the readmission process because you have to be readmitted. But a readmission policy means that the student has been out of the university for 1 academic year, which is 4 quarters or 3 semesters. So that means if I don't return in that 4th quarter, I need to be readmitted. So sometimes it was confusing to students because they're like, well, it says 4 quarters, and especially for students that are taking a leave of absence. So imagine if I'm taking a leave of absence for 4 quarters, I need to be aware that if I don't return in that 4th quarter, I'm going to need to be readmitted. Because sometimes on the leave of absence way, students think that if I take a leave, I'm protected. But if I fall outside of the 4 terms, my record's going to be inactive. So that's how the system judged it, and I think that's how we kind of wrote the policies. So we wrote policies on actually there were procedures because the readmission policy was never really clearly articulated. So it automatically said, is the record inactivated? To get it activated, we fill out a readmission form, we sign it, we drop it off to the graduate college, and the Keepler elves work behind the background, and all of a sudden, the record is updated.
And
So-
they're registered for courses.
Right. And magic happens. Financial aid is granted, bills are okay, the student is registered. But all of those things happen at different intervals. So I could easily be readmitted because we never did any readmissions in the old way until time tickets opened. So I could be readmitted anticipating waiting up until the term begins, and I could be readmitted anytime up to and even including the start of the term. So a student can be readmitted, hasn't been here maybe a year or 2, is readmitted in week 1, didn't fill out financial aid, didn't speak to anybody about their academic program. What do you think the success of that student's going to be? Well, at the undergraduate level, pretty terrible. At the graduate level, I would say, I don't know, 50-50, depending on who their advisor was, depending on what the process is, depending on their program structure, if the courses were offered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the readmission was clearly an entity within itself, but unfortunately, every time a record was inactivated, everyone used readmission. These are clear categories where they're not readmission. Readmission is only based on enrollment and tenure, the enrollment. So if there's a gap in enrollment and it falls outside of that, that's when the readmission process is used. If a student has graduated and the student is trying to apply to another program, and you can see the way you look at this is if the student is here, that's their program, an MS, a postmaster's, a PBC, and they want to go into this new program, and the caveat is that they graduated, that's what they are. Now, if there's a gap in enrollment and the old program was not completed and they're changing to an alternate program, this will help them understand. Because remember, I could be in a master's program wanting to be readmitted to a PhD program. I know that seems like lunacy for all of us, but students do think that way. And guess what would happen? The student would fill out a readmission form, and if we didn't catch it, presto, the student is in a PhD program, or vice versa, another master's program. And I know these are far-fetched examples, but they have happened. And
It causes the biggest headaches, unfortunately.
so part of it is that that's how I know Sarit Stein asked a question. Hold on, Sarit. Okay, so what we really want to do is we really want to make sure that everyone is clear about this. But most importantly, if there is a question anytime during not only this process, any of the procedures or policies that we covered, please ask somebody. Outreach to the graduate college, you can outreach to Natalie, myself, anyone, because I'd rather have you be aware before it goes through the process. And I've been answering readmission questions, policy questions on a continuous basis. Not because people are having trouble. I'd rather people understand the process and, be proactive. So if you're in a situation with a student, you're not sure what to do, or you get an email, the graduate college can help you, and we work with the graduate college all the time. So I just want you to be aware that that's how this is read. If this is the old program, this is the new program, and it falls under those caveats listed. So there's a couple of other things. Sorry, could you scroll up, Central? Thank you.
Up
or down. So there's a couple of other things that are explained here. 4 or more quarters, 3 or more semesters. That's the enrollment. There's also stipulations of when students can add programs. It's not really advantageous that students are adding additional programs, which are 2 to 3 year programs in the term that they're graduating, because it's problematic for certificates mostly, because certificates that are not aid eligible and are being coupled with master's degrees that are aid eligible, the stipulation is that the certificate courses must apply to the master's. So I, as a student, should not be in a master's program in my last term and then adding a certificate that's not aid eligible, because that's what's going to happen. The student's not going to apply for graduation. That student's going to be classified as a master's student. That student's going to get federal aid and is only taking certificate coursework because they've completed their master's. So we have to be very, I'm not saying to apply a degree of scrutiny. We have to understand, if I'm in the term of graduation and something is happening, sometimes it's best that the student just apply for admissions for a future term rather than coupling some of these. So that's that little nuance there. And that really only happens with a PMC, a cert, and I'm adding this. So there's a couple of caveats there. Most of them can be accomplished, but I did note these additions cannot be added in a term where the student is graduating. In the MS PhD, must be added for a future term, because we don't want to run the risk of coursework not applying appropriately and aid being assigned to degree credentials for which the student is getting federal aid that is applicable and the secondary credential is non-applicable. The assumption is that everything you're taking is being added or part of that major credential. So I'll give you an example. A certificate in, say, public health, it's classified as a cert. There are 3 courses. The student is taking a master's. If they're classified as a master's in Banner, the student wants to add the cert. The student's not close to graduation. They met with their advisor, and yes, they can use those 3 classes as electives as part of the master's. That's okay. As long as that coursework for a non-aid eligible certificate is being incorporated and applied to the master's and can be used, they're okay. So that's why it's important to understand this grid. If you have any other questions, it's a little crosswalk, and please ask. If you catch anything that might have been a new scenario or a scenario that might not make sense, we'll gladly explain it. But I'd like for you to take the time to read it. Like I said, this is a work in progress, and we created this because there's so many nuances. We wouldn't be Drexel if we didn't have the million nuances. And there are all kinds of categories that they fall in. And, every student is different. Every student is unique. And students create these, sometimes these wonderful ideas, which we can sometimes accommodate, which sometimes we cannot accommodate. But we don't want to violate policy in the process. Yes, Suri.
So for if this PhD student is going to another program, either within the college or in a different college, I think it would be beneficial for the current advisor to get a warning, because it's like, in our instance, a student went over to CCI and they, we needed to cut off like the health
Insurance subsidy.
Yeah, the insurance and, make sure that they were like on the system. So I think that if PhD students are changing, that there needs to be something that goes to the current advisor, just,
We would know.
technically would have had no idea.
So does it fall in this category? I didn't complete the
Well, that-
PhD program.
That was the case.
Wait, we did add it, right? I thought we did. So say the
Yes, we
scenario
did.
again. It's a PhD student in what college?
In college, COE.
Okay.
Decides that they want to go do a master's in CCI.
Yeah, that,
And the only notes that were there was no alert. And I think it also happens
Yeah.
with majors
There it is, right
also,
here.
right?
Right.
Like even the same degree level, I mean, I
20.
think we've talked about somehow in AB, in sort of the right now process when students,
It's covered here in 29. So they were a PhD in COE, they went to an MS in a different college, it's not even being done by
Right.
CCS.
right, but they didn't know that.
Okay.
So what happened was, is sort of after the fact, is that the student was, the intention of the student originally was just to take a minor in CCI.
Right, okay. I remember
Right,
that.
and then in the middle of December, the student decides, oh, I'm gonna just drop my PhD, not communicate with COE, and only communicate with CCI, and say, oh, I wanna be in your master's program. So that, I think that was sort of an extreme case, but I think your point of somehow a communication
Yeah,
between the colleges or
absolutely.
advisors is really valuable, because we would have caught it a lot earlier than the shenanigans that happened.
But it just,
Coupled at the end, yeah.
it just
Yeah.
proves the point that forms, once a student is in the institution, it's not as easy as just filling out a form to get to another college. Now, what if that student in the PhD program had academic integrity issues or some type of violation that was in the process, and another college signed them into a master's program?
Right.
You know,
No, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
so that's why these are in
Well,
place.
going through new admissions
Yes.
is a good check, you know.
The common scenario that we have, our faculty recruit a lot of their PhD students from our current MS school. So a common scenario we find is a master's student is completing their degree requirements, let's say this winter, graduating winter, joining the PhD program in spring. And I'm sorry if I'm missing it. I don't know if I see that specific scenario on there. There
Go up,
is
it should be.
no gap in enrollment. They're completing their MS and then going to PhD.
So MS to PhD in the
But
same
that's-
college.
Whole program not completed.
Well, no, in this, isn't that,
No, you give me that.
MS? Isn't it?
No, I think Sean's asking about this one. It would be graduating, they're graduating, and then they're
Oh.
moving. So I think a
Okay.
PhD needs to be added.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we can add that.
Yeah, it needs, a PhD needs to be added to the top one. They're actually graduating.
Right. So,
Right, they're
okay, so then
graduating.
they would go through admissions.
Yes.
Yeah,
But just the cautionary tale is that even if they're going through admissions and you know their intention, they haven't been confirmed yet. So I know that courses may fill up. We can't add students to courses in registration without the student being confirmed in the program. Because what happens is it creates really bad problems on the admission side, because if the student is in Sean's scenario, I'm in the MS, and in the spring I want to be in the PhD. I know the department knows the student's going to get accepted, it's an exceptional student. The student applies, they're waiting for the confirm to happen. Registration is happening in spring term, we add the student, admissions can't confirm the record. So then what happens is we have to pull the student out of registration, which could cause havoc to the student in terms of if they're in BB Learn courses and interrupt their studies, which we don't want to do. Then we have to wait till admissions confirms them so that we have a confirmed record. And then what will happen is then we have to register them again, which causes problems. So what you should do is before you register any student, check the Sagaskin record to see if they're confirmed, because they should have a general student record in that program. And if they don't, you could always say, well, where are they in the process? They could be very close, or they could have been given an offer and accepted. The student probably didn't get back to admissions to confirm yet. So there's a variety of things. Admissions could have done what they need to do. They're just waiting on the student to accept or whatever. So the confirmation always has to happen. So an offer could be done. I accepted it. We're waiting for the confirmation to happen. Once the confirmation happens, Slate can't do what it needs to do with Banner in terms of if Banner already has a record. So when the admissions record goes through, it looks at Banner and says, you already have a record there, I can't add one. So then we're called and says, okay, what you need to do is we need to remove the registration. And that has caused problems with students because they were in the midst of BB Learn, depending on the timing. We actually had one student that we didn't discover until like week 5. And it was really bad because if you remove a student and they're yanked out of Learn, you can run the risk of them losing all of their coursework. So we definitely don't want that happen even in weeks 1 and 2, because the professor could see them, then they're gone, and then they've lost all of their information. And it's not really a good way for a student to start a new program. And that goes for also bachelor's to master's. So bachelor's to master's, we can't add any graduate coursework Well, for sure, you shouldn't because you're gonna get a level restriction in registration. But I understand you want to get the student in the courses, but you can, just make sure that the record is confirmed. If you've been waiting a long time, outreach to somebody. We'll help move things along, but you know, the registration is very problematic if admissions can't confirm the record, and then we have to pull the student out of coursework, which is what we really don't want to do. Because, you know, we have audits that run that says students can't, imagine this, students can't be enrolled in coursework for a program for which they've already graduated. So we'll get that as an audit because it'll show the student in a master's, it'll show they've graduated, and it'll show that they're enrolled, but we don't have a new record. So we go in and outreach to everybody, and that's how we kind of find this. But if we could be more proactive, that will really help the process.
Taz was helping me through a situation like this a week or two ago, and I believe graduate admissions said that they couldn't confirm the record until after the term was over.
Well,
So now it's going to be like determines, and I guess I have to clear the student and then quickly add the PhD to the record and register them all within like.
I think their caveat may be that they're waiting on the degree to be awarded. So I don't know. No? Yeah, so I don't know. Please, if there's any anomalies like that, just outreach to some, yes, please, because, you know, we're really trying to make this process better and I don't want to make it flawed. Sometimes they may be waiting for a degree, but the degree could already be confirmed. And we're also really streamlining the process of the confirmation of the degree. When departments go in and clear students, we're actually trying to close the window for when that information is in DegreeWorks. If that information is in DegreeWorks, we've been working with Academic Information and Systems to run reports that will update all the information in Banner. So that means we don't have to go in manually and do it. So we run the report, we pull the information. If it's in DegreeWorks, then there's a job that runs and we can upload all that information and it closes the window between when an advisor or clearing representative actually clears the student and when the student is actually awarded their degree. Now I'm going to say something else. I hope this comes to fruition, and Sean is here from AIS, so he'll say that I didn't say it. But we are working with AIS to also, when a student their degree is confirmed, the student will get information in the portal to say that their degree has been awarded. So that will allow the student to say, hey, my degree is confirmed. Now I can request transcripts. Now I can move on. So we've always wanted that, and I'm hoping that it will happen in spring. So that will be a really good tool for advisors and clearing reps to say, I've cleared you, but wait until you receive, and if they're also on the Drexel One app, they will get a message as well. So part of it is they'll go into Drexel One and they'll say, an academic credential has been awarded for you, click here, and it goes to the student profile and it shows what degree was awarded. So then they know, hey, that means I'm officially awarded my degree. So we would get students that get cleared, request transcripts, order transcripts, transcripts got sent back, degree wasn't on the transcript. The student is really angry and saying, my advisor told me I was cleared and now I requested a transcript and the institution or the agency doesn't have my degree award. So we're really trying to fix that. So hopefully that will happen in spring and that may solve some of these questions. But Sean, going back to your point, please send it if you have it so that we can research it with AIS and admissions as well. Okay. Okay, I hope this will help you. See, we've already found one, but please go through this, and I'm sure there's a couple of other categories because, you know, all of you are the most, knowledgeable and you're the closest ones to it. And we see them on the back end, but you may see scenarios where students have, and maybe there's a scenario that shouldn't be here, should be here, or, vice versa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we're done the general content. I'll touch base on a memo that all of you should have received this morning about accelerated degree applications and changes. I'm not going to go into the details of sort of the working group right now because I don't, from the provost level, I don't have any updates to share. But I think Taz got some questions this morning. Is anyone here from?
I think it's just about the timeline. Again, they just want to make sure that if there's additional information about can they accept 5 college students in time?
No.
Okay, good. That's what they were
I
asking.
mean, the memo itself is clear that we're not, the graduate college right now will not process any accelerated degree applications until, what is it, week 2 of summer? So, yeah, right now. So
usually on a regular day, we get 10, 20 students just come in with their paperwork, just drop it off, get and just for efficiency, that just doesn't make sense. And then, as we know, as an institution, the provost office is undertaking a project to look at the accelerated programs in general. And so right now, I don't have updates to share, but
Yeah, that was unfortunately kind of a concerning memo for a lot of people. I met with our undergraduate team this morning, and we had a lot of issues we were hoping, at least I was hoping I could bring up right here. Particularly that we have at least 5 students in the pipeline to apply effective for the spring quarter. And if they had to wait until summer quarter to apply, they would not be able to complete the SMS program. Also, we were kind of curious on the justification of it and time of implementation, because that means we'll be reviewing plans of study during one and withdrawal weeks. And there's just kind of a list of things that we looked at in this that we have been from.
so what I would suggest is that if you can get your team together and come up with a list of questions and clarifications and send them to me.
Sure, I have it here.
Yeah, why don't you just email them to me, because I think it's very complex, and it's not just, we're not trying to pull the rug out from under a student, but there have been some practices here at Drexel for many, many years that we are finding out that are problematic from a federal point of view, and it just takes time to investigate that. Like it's at the president provost level. It's not just us. So it's not just the grad college trying to parse these things out. And as we know, Drexel's complex. So I would say, get those list of questions, send them to me, and I can do my best to answer them.
This isn't any like Title IX stuff. This is specific to this timeline from yesterday's.
I mean, Title IV.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, no, Title IV, fine. Yeah, no, I know. And like I said, so if there's 5 students in the pipeline, I want to look at them. I want to see where they're at. We have to look at it on a case by case basis. And I think that's what the memo said. Send them to me.
And if there's any way that could be sent to the undergraduate advisors?
They do. So Shivanti's office, who's undergraduate education, went to advising leads. And, it's going this afternoon.
We just put the request in, so Shivanti's traveling and
Shivanti's traveling. So yes, so undergrad advising leads are getting it. So this memo, I'll just tell you who it was sent to: deans, undergrad and grad associate deans, and advisors. It wasn't sent to students. It wasn't sent to general faculty. We didn't want to cause mass chaos because we knew that there was going to be a lot of questions. So that's the population. But they said Shivanti is overseeing undergraduate, the Council of Academic Deans and advising leads. So it should be going out there. But I'm sure you've already shared it with everyone. So that's with your colleagues, and that's okay. But it is coming from her end because we don't have access to that population.
There's an undergraduate conference this weekend. And I think that the university needs to give anyone who's going to that wording on how to talk about BSMS. And BSMS always seems to come up always in our college. And I don't want to say, it's.
So what I'm going to say now is just my personal opinion. Accelerated degrees, BSMS is not going away at Drexel. It's the way it's executed. Okay, so it's the way the plans of study are structured. So I know that the language in the past has been BSMS 5 years. You can get 2 degrees for the price of one, like all of that kind of stuff. That kind of language I would stay away from. But I agree with you. So I'll talk to Elizabeth right now.
Something needs to go out before.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. We can do that. Any other questions? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Sorry. You had to be subjective. So we just have to work on getting graduate about the school. The problem is the graduate course is not viable right now. And if it is, then we would be the first point of contact. So we're looking at fighting. The problem is, when are they going to be part of the, we need to leave about and we'll draw for graduate students to be part of the. Is that what you're asking?